If there is one thing that Andor Season 1 has left us all questioning about, it's definitely what really happened on Kenari. During the first 3 episodes of Andor, we are given plenty of scenes that suggested what might have occurred on Kenari, but no real definitive answers as to what. And the most that we hear after that is from Zan, who points out that the planet has been sealed off following a mining disaster. No one is allowed to enter the system. But I think I might have an idea of what went down and how this might play into Season 2 of Andor. In the flashback scenes on Kenari, we are shown a tribe of children with no adults in sight, a massive abandoned mine, and some suspicious looking rebel/separatist activity. And I think that there is a good chance that all of this might be related to the construction of the Death Star. Consider this for a moment. We know for a fact that the amount of resources required to construct the Death Star was enormous. It's a major feat of construction, and so the Empire had to source its raw materials from many different planets. So what if the abandoned mine that we see here is the aftermath of the Empire stripping the planet's resources to construct the Death Star? Now, of course, given the timing of the flashbacks, it wouldn't be the Empire directly, as it wasn't founded at the time. But the people responsible for stripping the world bare could very well be the Republic or Separatists, and this could very well be a possibility as it was the Separatists that actually first came up with the design of the Death Star. This is something that we see in the background during the attack of the clones, with the Geonosians responsible for its architectural design. So what this really means is that the construction of the superweapon could very well have started under the jurisdiction of the Republic or Separatists, or hey, maybe even both. Knowing that Palpatine was really just the mastermind behind the entire Clone Wars, he could very well have decided to pull in resources from both factions to begin work on the Death Star. Especially during the waning days of the Clone Wars, it wouldn't be too difficult to pull a few strings here and there to begin the construction of the Death Star. After all, most of the galaxy's attention would be focused on the war effort, making it easier to achieve such a scheme. It also leads me to my next point. During the flashback scene, we get to see the crew members of the crashed ship bear Separatist symbols, but in the same episode we also hear Marva calling them Republic officers. And this was a major point of discussion with lots of theorizing on why Republic officers would be wearing Separatist uniforms. And if you consider the possibility that Sidious might have been able to pull together some resources between both factions to start the construction of the Death Star, it starts to make a whole lot of sense. The reason for why the dead crew members were wearing Separatist symbols and why Marva calls them the Republic officers could very well be due to the fact that they are indeed both, a result of Palpatine's efforts to pull in manpower and materials from both sides. If it is the case that what we see here is indeed the result of Palpatine's efforts to pull together resources from both factions, it could very well blur the line between who is a Separatist and who is from the Republic, because it really wouldn't matter. And there is a strong possibility that Sidious has already started work on the Death Star well before the end of the Clone Wars, because in the closing moments of the Revenge of the Sith, we get a scene where Vader and Palpatine look out from a Star Destroyer where we can see the skeletal structure of the Death Star, indicating to us that the Death Star's construction was well underway even before the Clone Wars had officially ended. So it would make a lot of sense that such activities would and could occur on planets like Kenari, where resources were being stripped and the lines between Separatists and Republic begin to blur. If Kenari was also a source of resources for the construction of the Death Star, it would also explain why there are no adults. You see, the moment Kenari was exhausted of all resources, the Empire could very well have decided to exterminate the entire population in an effort to keep the project a secret. And this wouldn't be the first time that the Empire has done this. In fact, the very same fate occurred with the Geonosians. In an effort to keep the project a secret, Palpatine ordered for the genocide of the Geonosians through sterilization. Under the supervision of Grand Moff Tarkin, the Empire used sterilization gas to ensure that Geonosian queens would never be able to lay fertile eggs, effectively killing over 100 billion Geonosians in the process. So the very same fate could have occurred on Kenari but a lot earlier, killing off the entire population once the Empire had no use for Kenari, but not knowing that a small group of children survived. And Kenari would be a prime location for this. Even though it was located in the mid-rim, Kenari is often described as a planet rich in mineral deposits, but far from the attention of the core worlds. which meant that Palpatine could operate there with a decent amount of secrecy. And we know that this is a planet that isn't very well known even outside the core worlds. And we see this when Zan has to look up where Kenari is after the Primor put out a bounty for Cassian.
Yeah, he never heard of it either.
So really, Kenari is the ideal place to gather resources for the Death Star's construction, given that it is a planet that no one knows or cares much about, but still rich in natural resources and only inhabited by primitive tribes. Another clue that was given to us as to the possible connection between the Death Star and Kenari is the Imperial decree that Kenari was off-limits, supposedly toxic due to an Imperial mining disaster, which just so happens to be the same reason given to Jeddah following its destruction. So I really wouldn't be surprised if the Empire decided to use it as an excuse to cover up their activities and to make sure that no one would start paying attention as to what really went down. So really, this might be the show's way of telling us that hey, look, both things are connected. Especially after the post-credits scene, it's becoming pretty apparent that this is indeed the direction that the show is headed towards in Season 2. So, if Kenari was the result of the Death Star's construction process, what exactly does this mean for Cassian and how does it all connect with the central plotline of Season 2? Well, we do know for a fact that Season 2 will directly lead into the beginning of Rogue One, with Cassian already on the trail of the Death Star. So this means that at some point in Season 2, Cassian will somehow catch wind of what the Empire might be doing. And this is where it all connects to Kenari. Recall the fact that Cassian had a sister who was separated from him following the events of the crashed ship. And for bits of Episode 1, we are told that Cassian has never stopped looking for her even after all these years. And even though Marva tells him that it's all a fantasy to look for her, I'm not entirely convinced that this is true. There has to be a reason why this plot point was left somewhat unresolved by the end of Season 1. There has to be something more planned for it. So here is my theory. What if while Cassian was looking for his sister, he somehow catches wind of the Empire's activity to build the Death Star? Searching for his sister could very well take him back to Kenari or lead him to draw a connection between his home world and what the Empire is doing. In fact, Season 2 could take it a step further, with Cassian actually finding his sister locked away somewhere by the Empire, who then tells him that the Empire is up to something big. I could definitely see that following Cassian's departure from Kenari, the Republic forces that sweep in, who are really operating under Palpatine's orders, decide to round up the children and use them as slaves. It wouldn't be the first time the Empire decided to use slaves in the construction of the Death Star. After all, we did see exactly that on Narkina 5. Whatever the scenario is or how it will play out, I definitely think that there is a plausible connection between what went down on Kenari and the Death Star. There must be a reason why the show has given us all these scenes, only to never revisit throughout the entire season, and then at the end to give us a glimpse of the Death Star's construction. Just seems way too much of a coincidence for it not to be connected. So that is how I think Kenari is connected to the Death Star. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I am the Lost Acolyte,
and I have spoken.